Hello everyone and welcome to Introduction to Ethics. In this episode I'd like to talk about Kantian Deontology and introduce some basic concepts. First of all, in Kantian morality, happiness cannot be the criterion of any ethical behavior. In his own words, morals is not really the doctrine of how to make ourselves happy, but of how we are to be worthy of happiness. Morality cannot take happiness as a starting point according to Kant. One of Kant's starting points is the moral law that he names the categorical imperative. Kant himself gives at least three different formulations of categorical imperative, and one of the famous ones reads as follows. Kant says, act as if the maxim of your action were to become by your will a universal law of nature. This imperative or the rule at first sight resembles the idea summarized by the slogan, what if everyone did that? In Kant's version, you first check to find out whether it will be permissible for everyone to act in the exact way that you do under similar circumstances that you act. So let me give the false promise example that Kant himself is giving to exemplify this understanding further. Imagine that I find myself in a difficult situation financially. I can ask a friend to lend me some money, but at the same time I'm 100% sure that I will not be able to pay it back. The moral question here is this. When I am in a financial difficulty, should I ask my friend to lend me money and promise to pay it back even though I know that I will not be paying it back at all? In Kant's method, we have to find out what would happen if everyone in similar circumstances acted in the same way all the time. In this example, no one would ever trust each other's promises, so the practice of promising would vanish from society. Hence, according to Kant, false promise would not be permissible. It undermines itself. Giving a false promise is not morally permissible, it's wrong, because the idea undermines itself when we try to universalize the idea. And this is not because of the actual consequences of any particular false promises created, but because of the results of the hypothetical situation that we think through. Kant's method is actually different from answering the question, what if everyone did that, from just your own perspective. Maybe you don't mind if everyone were giving a false promise all the time. So you might not think that action of giving a false promise is wrong unless bad consequences follow. But Kant is interested in whether it's objectively possible to will, or to want in this context, that everyone gave a false promise. And he says it's morally wrong. Another important concept in Kant's moral philosophy is the goodwill. So one of Kant's starting points for building an ethical theory was the moral law that he names categorical imperative. The second starting point is the idea of goodwill. A goodwill is the only good thing without a condition. Other good things might be conditional. For instance, courage is good unless you are a courageous burglar. Self-control is good unless you are a self-controlled criminal. A goodwill is motivated by the idea of duty and not anything else. For example, Kant wants us to imagine one shopkeeper asking for fair prices so that he doesn't lose customers, and another one who asks for fair prices just because this is his ethical duty. For Kant, only the second shopkeeper does the morally right action, although there is no difference in the consequences of their actions. The consequences of an action have nothing to do with its moral value, its rightness or wrongness according to Kant. So this was another important concept in Kantian moral philosophy. A third important concept in Kantian moral philosophy is inclinations. Sometimes people do good things because they are inclined to do those good things. For example, some might enjoy donating to charity. According to Kant, if you are doing the right thing out of enjoyment, it doesn't have moral worth. In such a case, you are doing the good thing in line with duty, but not out of duty. Kant doesn't mean that it's morally wrong or it's not good to do good things. You can still do good things and enjoy them, but you cannot claim to have done something that has moral worth. These are good acts, but they are just amoral according to Kant. There can be all sorts of factors motivating our action, but duty must be the determining factor of all good actions for this action to have a moral worth. So now let me talk more about the categorical imperative, which is the Kantian moral rule. Kant believes that morality cannot be based on any empirical, in that sense, observable facts about human experience. So what's left? According to Kant, logical facts about human reason. Kantian morality is based on the form of moral law. So this form of moral law is moral in the sense that it's normative, which means it sets some standard to comply with. And it's also law. It is the same rule for everyone and at all times. The distinction between hypothetical imperatives and categorical imperatives is also important for Kant. Hypothetical imperatives are conditional on a certain goal. For instance, when you say, if you want to gain respect, don't tell lies, respect is the goal towards which honesty is the path to follow. And the same thing happens when you say, if you want to be a politician, look honest. You determine a goal and you determine the way to reach that goal. Neither of these imperatives have moral worth. Imperatives that are in line with categorical imperative are unconditional. They're absolute. They're like, don't tell lies without giving any further purpose. So when you ask why not, the answer is not a goal to reach. It's not so that you'll gain respect. According to Kant, there's only one categorical imperative, and it reads as follows. Act as if the maxim of your action were to become, by your will, a universal law of nature. And in this sentence, as you have seen, there's the concept of maxim, so I have to talk about this concept a bit. So a maxim is the principle that I follow to act in a certain way. So take these maxims. If you want to gain respect, don't tell lies. Take this second maxim. If you don't want to hurt others, don't tell lies. Or this third one. Don't tell lies. All three can pass the categorical imperative test, in the sense that you can will that they become a universal law. But only the last one has moral worth, according to Kant. So Kantian morality has two major criteria. First one, maxim passes the categorical imperative test, and second one, an action is done from duty, not merely in line with duty. So Kant himself gives some examples on how to benefit from this moral rule in real life cases. And in describing these cases, Kant introduces four new concepts. Actually, we can think about it in a 2x2 matrix. In the columns of the matrix, you can just write duties to yourself and duties to others. And in the rows of this 2x2 matrix, you can write perfect duties and imperfect duties. And then you'll have four different categories. Perfect duties are the ones that should always be followed by anyone. On the other hand, imperfect duties can sometimes be ignored. For instance, Kant takes suicide as an example. Kant believes that committing suicide is in contradiction with your duty to yourself of furthering your life. He thinks the maxim favoring suicide is not universalizable. Another example would be neglecting your talents and refusing to aid others, two other examples. Kant agrees that you can universalize maxims favoring these acts. Nevertheless, you cannot universalize the willing of these acts. You cannot expect others to will the same acts. And hence he thinks these are imperfect duties. These were Kant's own examples on how we might use his categorical imperative in real life cases. And this concludes this episode.